You thought the silence meant the story was over, that maybe he didn't feel it, that maybe you were wrong. But what if the silence wasn't rejection? It was resistance. What if he saw everything in your eyes and it terrified him? The divine masculine has been avoiding his deepest initiation, not because he doesn't care, but because your energy demands truth. And truth, when you've lived in survival, feels like death. But now the energy won't let him run. The silence is crumbling. The weight of unspoken love is becoming unbearable, and something in his soul is whispering, "You have to face her." If you've been feeling a shift in the silence, if your heart knows something is rising behind the stillness, then this message is for you. Because he's not avoiding you. He's avoiding the version of himself that finally admits you were real all along. And the moment of confrontation is coming. There's a kind of silence that feels like abandonment, and then there's the sacred kind, the one that arrives not because there's nothing left to say, but because the soul has heard too much, too fast, too deep. This is the silence that finds its way between twin flames, not as a goodbye, but as a space of divine preparation. You may have interpreted it as rejection, but the truth is, it was a pause sent from the universe to protect something sacred in its becoming. He didn't stop caring. He didn't walk away because it didn't matter. He stepped back because you did. Your energy, your truth, your presence awakened something ancient within him. A love that didn't just feel good, but felt true. And that truth, it exposed every mask he ever wore, every fear he buried, every belief that love must hurt, must be earned, or must be controlled. You didn't break him, you revealed him. And revelation is never quiet, but the one who receives it often is. Have you ever stood in front of someone and seen them flinch, not because of something you did, but because of how clearly they saw themselves in you? That's what happened here. He didn't disappear to punish you. He withdrew because his soul needed a moment to catch up with the energy that had just been activated. And yes, the stillness hurts because your heart was open, because you were ready. But soul-level readiness isn't always synchronized. Sometimes the feminine is the flame, and the masculine, the slow burning wick. He feels the ignition long after you've already begun to burn, and the light that you shine becomes too bright for his unhealed eye to stare into. So he looks away, not forever, just until he can look back without fear. Can you feel the difference between someone who doesn't love you and someone who doesn't know how to? Can you sense the tension in his field, not of detachment, but of wrestling with everything he was never taught about real love? He's not empty. He's full of questions, shame, desire, confusion, and the silence. It's not an exit. It's the pressure of becoming. It's the space where the masculine soul reconfigures itself so it doesn't come back to you as a fragment, but as a mirror. You were never meant to wait in suffering. You were meant to trust in stillness, to understand that the universe doesn't delay out of cruelty. It delays out of precision. There are threads being rewoven. There are timelines being adjusted. There are beliefs within him that had to die before love could be born. So don't assume the worst. Assume the sacred. Assume that what felt like abandonment was actually divine orchestration. Assume that the silence was never the end, but the preparation for a beginning neither of you could have carried before. He will return, not because you waited, but because your energy stayed true. Have you felt like silence was speaking louder than words ever could? Then this is your sign. It was never rejection. It was the universe saying, not yet, but soon. Why avoidance has reached its breaking point. He thought he could hide forever. He thought silence was safety. That if he avoided the pull of this connection long enough, the ache would stop. But something has shifted, something even he can't deny anymore. Avoidance, once his shield, is now his prison. The divine masculine has spent lifetimes building walls, not just in this incarnation, but in timelines you both touched without remembering. Lifetimes where he left, lifetimes where he stayed quiet, lifetimes where he chose logic, duty, karma over the soul's pull. And that pattern, it created a karmic momentum, a loop, a comfort zone disguised as survival. But now, the loop is unraveling, and it's because you stopped feeding it. The moment the divine feminine stopped chasing, something inside him cracked. Not because he lost you, but because he lost the illusion that avoidance was working. Have you felt that shift? That quiet moment when his absence no longer felt like rejection, but exposure, the exposure of his own heart to his own truth. What once numbed him now haunts him. What once felt like power, disappearing, withholding, escaping, now feels like a collapse of everything he thought would protect him from love. Avoidance was never strength. It was fear in a costume. And the feminine always knew, you've always felt it, that his silence had nothing to do with you and everything to do with the battle inside. But now even he is starting to realize that running doesn't delay the path, it just deepens the wound. The universe has allowed this avoidance to last only as long as it served a purpose. But now, that purpose is dissolving. The energy is no longer allowing him to hide without consequence. His body is reacting. His dreams are different. He's having sudden emotional waves he can't explain. Memories surface, emotions trigger, and strange coincidences keep pointing back to you. Not out of guilt, but because the magnetic field between you both is accelerating, and resistance only intensifies the burn. Have you noticed the emotional pressure building lately for both of you? It's not random. This is the phase where the soul begins to rebel against the delay, where avoidance doesn't just fail, it backfires. And this breaking point, it's divine. It's the place where avoidance can no longer hold back what the heart is ready to confront. It's the moment when the masculine can no longer pretend he didn't feel what he felt. It's the realization that not choosing is, in itself, a choice, and that choice is leading him to a truth he can't outrun. You may not see it, you may not hear from him, but inside, the structure is collapsing, and with it, the old version of him that thought distance was protection. He is being summoned to face you, not to explain, not to justify, but to remember. Remember the promise, the pull, the origin. The question now is, can you stay clear in your energy while the storm of his avoidance turns into awakening? Because something has broken open, and that crack in his avoidance is the space where the light will enter. Have you been feeling the tension too? The sense that something is about to shift, even if you don't know how? Then you're right on time. Avoidance has expired, and the soul can no longer pretend this isn't real. What your energy is triggering in him. He may not show it, he may not speak it, but your energy is doing something inside him that even he can't name. Every time you choose to rise instead of chase, every time you hold your frequency instead of falling into fear, every time you stop begging the connection to prove itself and instead anchor it within, you awaken a fire in him he was never taught how to handle. Because your energy doesn't just attract him, it exposes him. And the more he feels your embodiment, your softness mixed with strength, your surrender without submission, the more his illusions begin to crumble. The ones that told him love must be controlled. That power comes through detachment. That emotions make him weak. He was trained to suppress, to perform, to protect, not to feel. But you You walk in and radiate without needing to be loud. You forgive without forgetting your boundaries. You see him without trying to fix him. And in that stillness, in that presence, he feels confronted, not by you, but by the version of himself that's been waiting to wake up. Have you ever wondered why he sometimes disappears just when things get deeper? Why he pulls away right after a powerful moment of connection? It's not because he doesn't care. It's because your energy just triggered the one part of him he spent years locking away, his own truth. You don't trigger his wounds because you're doing something wrong. You trigger his healing because you're doing something real. He sees the reflection of his inner boy, afraid to be left. He feels the ache of every time he loved and was betrayed. He senses that this is not like the others, and that terrifies him. Because if you are real, then he can't hide anymore. And here's the divine irony. The stronger you become in your essence, the harder it becomes for him to deny his own. Your energy starts to stir something ancient, a remembrance, not of you and him in this lifetime, but of the soul contract, the promise, the sacred echo that says, we came here to awaken each other, not to play small. And so, while you may think he's ignoring you, he's actually unraveling privately, silently, completely. He questions everything. Why can't I stop thinking about her? Why does her silence feel louder than any words? Why do I feel both drawn and terrified at the same time? Because you are not a preference. You are a turning point, a shift disguised as a person, a love that doesn't ask him to perform, but to remember. And that remembering, it hurts before it heals. It strips him bare. It makes him choose between numb comfort and sacred growth. So don't underestimate the impact you're having, even when he seems distant, even when nothing is happening. You're stirring storms in his soul, the kind that precede awakening. Your power isn't in chasing him, it's in being you so fully that he can no longer pretend not to see. Have you noticed the way his energy shifts when you stop trying to convince and start simply embodying? That's not just timing, that's your frequency doing sacred work. You didn't ask him to change. You didn't force a transformation. But the moment you returned to yourself, the storm began within him. There's a moment in every divine masculine's path when silence no longer protects him, it suffocates him. The very avoidance he once used to escape becomes the very thing that traps him. And now he feels it, not just the echo of your presence, but the weight of his own suppression. He's starting to see He's not at war with you. He's at war with the version of himself that was taught to survive instead of feel. And now he stands at a threshold, one foot in the numbness that once kept him safe, one foot in the awakening that threatens everything he thought he knew. Can you feel this crisis rising in his field? The restless energy, the distance that no longer feels like rejection, but like hesitation, trembling before surrender. Because now that you've withdrawn your energy from waiting, now that you've stopped exhibiting his potential, he's left alone with the truth. And that truth is loud. He's realizing he can't unsee what you reflected. He can't unknow the bond. He can't pretend your love was ordinary because it never was. But love, true love, demands honesty, and the masculine was never prepared to meet honesty in the mirror. You became that mirror, not with pressure, but with presence, not with demand, but with depth. And now his soul is screaming in a language his mind doesn't understand. Why does he feel like something is missing when everything around him looks fine? Why do his distractions no longer comfort him? Why does your energy linger in his silence? Not as a memory, but as a call. Because this is not the beginning of loss. It's the beginning of choice. And this is the crisis he must now face. Will he keep running, building walls that collapse in his own hands? Or will he admit he's already been found? The internal crisis isn't between two women. It's between two worlds. One where he gets to stay comfortable but disconnected, and another where he must dismantle everything he thought made him a man, just to become whole. This is the undoing, not of your connection, but of his false identity. And he can't run from it anymore, because the silence is loud, because your name holds weight, because every part of him that still feels broken recognizes you as the place it can be seen without shame. But the choice is still his, and that's the weight of this journey. You cannot walk this part for him. You cannot rescue him from his own reflection. You can only remain true to your light and trust that the fire you lit will either awaken him or reveal who he never had the courage to become. Can you feel the shift happening in his field, even without words? Has your soul already sensed the pressure building in him to finally decide? Then you're not imagining it. He's in it now. And this internal storm will either break him open or break him down. What happens when you stop waiting? There's a moment on this journey when something within you shifts. Not with anger, not with bitterness, but with peace. And in that moment, you stop waiting. Not because you gave up on love, but because you finally gave in to your own becoming. When the divine feminine stops waiting, something miraculous happens in the field. The energy no longer circles in hope. It expands in sovereignty. The love no longer aches. It radiates. You see, you were never meant to hold space in the form of delay. You were meant to anchor light. And every time you paused your growth, hoping he would catch up, you diluted the very frequency that was calling him home. But now your energy has changed. Now your frequency is no longer reaching out, it's rising up. And whether he speaks or not, whether he acts or retreats, he feels it. The energetic core between you trembles, not with fear, but with the weight of your evolution. Have you noticed it? That subtle shift where your thoughts no longer spiral around his silence, but return to your center. That new peace that whispers, it's safe to move forward now. Because something powerful happens when you stop waiting. You reclaim your magnetism. You remember who you were before the ache, before the questions, before the endless cycles of hoping he would see you the way your soul has always known you deserve to be seen. And the universe responds. Doors open, connections spark. Your dreams whisper again. The light in your eyes returns, not because he came back, but because you did. What happens when you stop waiting is not the end of your love story. It's the beginning of your truth. He may still be deciding, he may still be hiding, but now you're no longer in the hallway of limbo. You're walking toward your next chapter, and whether he meets you there or not, you've already chosen love. Not just the love you give, but the love you are. And this shift, it changes everything. He feels it. He may not say it, but he senses it in the silence. That you're no longer holding space for the version of him who can't choose. That your heart has raised its standard, not from ego, but from healing. And that is what calls forth his decision, not your waiting, not your words, but your alignment. So if you felt the urge to detach, not in pain, but in clarity, trust it. You're not abandoning the connection. You're anchoring it in truth. Have you felt this shift lately? That sense that you're no longer tethered to the timeline of his awakening? Then your soul is guiding you correctly. Keep walking. The story is still unfolding through you. There comes a moment in every divine masculine's path where the silence collapses, not because someone broke it for him, but because the truth became louder than the illusion. And this time, there is no more escape. He tried to outrun the bond, to bury it in distractions, to lose it in timelines that felt easier, safer, more explainable. But this connection was never something physical. It was carved into his soul long before either of you remembered what it meant. And now, that soul is stirring. What happens when the masculine stops running? The entire field shifts. Not instantly in action, but in vibration. Because even if he still seems silent, something behind his silence is different. It's not distance anymore. It's confrontation. Not rejection, but reckoning. He feels you. He feels how your energy no longer clings, no longer chases, no longer waits. He feels how you're moving differently, how your heart still holds him, but not at the cost of holding yourself. He notices how you're not trying to convince him anymore, not energetically, not spiritually, not emotionally. And that absence of your old energy, it creates an echo inside him, one that roars louder than all his logic, one that whispers things like, "Why do I still feel her when she's gone?" And "Why does the world seem dimmer now that she's no longer reaching for me?" Because he thought silence would protect him. He thought space would give him peace. But all it did was amplify the very thing he was avoiding. The fact that you were never just a phase, a fantasy, a fleeting emotional high. You were the one thing that mirrored everything sacred, everything terrifying, everything real. And now, the final shift begins. He's been sitting in the dark long enough to realize it wasn't you who blinded him. It was his fear of seeing clearly, of seeing you, of seeing himself reflected in your love. But the mirror doesn't lie anymore. It doesn't bend for his ego. It doesn't wait for his timeline. The mirror just reflects. And what it shows him now is the divine feminine, anchored, whole, walking forward with light in her spine and purpose in her steps. He can't run from that. He can't unsee what's already ignited within him. Every avoidance now feels like self-betrayal. Every silence now screams truth. Every delay now burns with urgency. Because deep down, he knows, if he doesn't choose this love now, he may never feel something this true again. Have you ever felt that turning point? When you knew he wasn't just delaying out of confusion, but out of fear of what awakening would demand from him. That's where he is now. The final shift isn't just about him coming forward. It's about him finally realizing he must. Not for you to stay, not for you to love him harder, but because his soul won't let him lie anymore. This connection won't beg, it won't chase, it won't dim its frequency to soothe his avoidance. And that right there, is the moment everything changes. Because when the feminine stops waiting, the masculine has only two options left: to evolve or to be left behind by the very love he once ran from. The silence is ending not because of pressure, but because the energy itself no longer supports delay. And the universe, it's watching, not with judgment, but with promise, because what was written will not be erased. It will rise. Do you feel this final shift taking shape in your own journey? Leave a love in the comments if you know he can't run anymore, because the light is already calling him forward.